start with. So those are the two families I would look at if you're going to get started. Also, lettuce is pretty easy. Although you do get a little bit more crossing there, it's easy to harvest. We all know, if you're a gardener, that lettuce bolts really easily, so you don't have to wait too long for it to go to seed. But so since we're getting into harvest, knowing when to harvest your plants for seed savings is obviously really different. You might have never let your plants go to seed. So it's important to know at what stage you need to harvest things. So there's your easy plants that are harvestable for seed at the same point as they would be to eat them. So those are those same examples we just gave of tomatoes and peppers. If they're red peppers and not green young peppers, depending. What else is harvestable? Oh, winter squash is another one. Now squash gets a little bit complicated because of the crossing, but it is easy to do the actual harvesting and processing of the seed, because we all know we've carved pumpkins before. That stuff starts really easily after that. Then there's another level of the other plants, that the vegetables that are actually fruits, that are for seed. You want to let go a little bit longer than you would for eating. So let's say a cucumber. When you want to pick a cucumber to eat it, you pick it when it's pretty small and nice and green, doesn't have big chunky seeds on the inside. So it's obviously not ideal for seed production. You're going to want to let it get a little bit bigger and past its time. So I brought an example. This is cut in half, but this is what a cucumber should look like, depending on the variety. This color, it'll turn yellow, sometimes it'll turn brown, and they'll get harder, and then they'll start to get a little bit soft again. Pass this around if anyone can see it. That cucumber is actually really sad. I thought I was going to be able to use that to save seed, and it didn't have any seeds in it. It happens sometimes, sort of a quirk of cucumbers. Do you have a question?
Was that a green?
It was green, yeah. If I had eaten this, I would have picked it earlier and it would have been green. Yeah. The same is true of eggplants. When you cook an eggplant, you might notice there's seeds in it, but they're pretty immature. And so if you want to actually save that eggplant for seed, you're going to want to let that go a little longer till it's really ugly and past its prime. They usually turn yellow and brown too. And then summer squash, by the time you want them to harvest them for seed, they should look just like winter squash. They should be hard on the outside, nice. They'll get huge. You know how big zucchini can get if you let them get out of control. If you want to save seed for zucchini, you want them to get even bigger. They're going to get 3 feet long and hard as a rock. So it requires a little bit more patience and a little bit more time for those vegetables. And then finally, there's the ones that we don't eat for their fruits, we eat for their plant parts. So lettuce, broccoli, cabbage, all those plants. And so you're going to need to let those plants go through a completely different part of their life cycle than you're used to. So I'm assuming people have let lettuce go to seed before, right? And it gets 6 feet tall. So that's the stage that we want to let all of those plants get to if we want to save them for seed. And then just a general principle in terms of knowing when things are ready. I'll pass these around too. These are beans. Beans are another example of that, where you wouldn't pick them when they're dry and crackly unless you're really ambitious and are growing like shelling beans. So this is one stage you want to be at. But in order to store seeds for use the following year, presumably, you want to make sure that they're dry. So there's some different processing that should happen. So for example, with the beans that I'm passing around, you can let them dry on the plant. They're already pretty much good to go by the time you harvest them. Maybe you might need to dry them out a little bit. And for the same with something like winter squash, they're pretty dry already when they're in the plant. So all you really need to do is scoop them out, get any crud off of them that you don't want in whatever you're storing them in. Maybe put them out on a screen or a towel in some light, but not direct blazing sun. Let them dry till they're dry, till you know there's no moisture in there. And with some other plants, there might be a little bit more of a processing element. So let's say, for instance, that you have tomatoes. I brought some tomatoes with me. Fortunately, I don't have any that are at a later stage. Oops. So say you're saying, okay, I want to save seed from this tomato, and all right, I'm going to take the seeds out.
You're just squishing it.
I'm squishing it.
What about using a rotten one?
So
or one that's on the vine that's kind of...
So that's really important what she mentioned about being rotten, because that's part of the natural process. When a tomato falls on the ground naturally from the plant, it's going to rot there in the ground, and then it'll spring up new plants pretty soon afterwards usually. And so what we want to do is we kind of want to imitate that process, because that rotting is part of what gets the seed.
So when I have some rotten ones sitting there, and that's why I'm here today.
Yeah.
Do I just squeeze the rotten one in the jar?
So you definitely could do that if you have some rotten tomatoes, but you don't have to let them rot first.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is, because I like to eat them too, so if I'm doing this, I'll just kind of squeeze them, and then I'll put them in salad or whatever. Put that there. So what you can do is just, squeeze them out. You notice that tomatoes come in this kind of gelatinous sack. The same thing as cucumbers will do the same thing. Melons often have some sort of gelatinousness around them. And so you might think, oh, I'll just put this out on a towel and I'll let it dry, and then I'll put that in a jar. You can do that, but I've done it before. It doesn't really work out that well. Because that gelatinous sac is going to stick to things, and then the seed doesn't really go through the process that it's used to going through. It's used to being in the ground, it's used to having bacteria and things fermenting it, or it might be used to going through an animal who's eating the fruit, right? So all we really need to do to imitate that process is get enough seed in here with all of its goop and acidic juices and everything, so that you have a nice layer. You might need to add a little bit of water so that it's nice and a good consistency and not going to dry out, and just let it sit, and it'll ferment on its own just like it would if it were in the ground. And it'll get pretty gross, so I would do this outside. It'll smell a little bit, and you'll get sort of a film after a few days, like kind of a moldy grossness on the top. And then after a few days, once it's reached that point, you can pour it through a strainer and rinse it, and all of that gunk will come off of it. So all the gelatin that's kind of around it will come off. And it'll look like the seeds do when you get them out of a seed packet, where they have that kind of fuzzy layer on them, but they don't have any of that goop on them. And at that point, you can put them out. I would use a coffee filter. I wouldn't use paper towel because they usually stick to it. Or if you have a really fine screen, that works too. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So if you have tomatoes in your yard and you're new to seed saving, this is the easiest thing to do. Doesn't take too much effort. Tomatoes have lots of seeds. You can still eat the fruit. So it's a really good introduction. Do you have a question?
Should we put a lid on the jar?
I would leave it open. If you like thought that birds might eat or something, you could. But I just wouldn't seal it because you don't want it to be airtight. Yeah.
I just suggest that you can do this. It's really good to do this with your own tomatoes, but don't try to do it with a store-bought tomato, even if it is tasty, because they become so green. There's no seed. The seeds haven't developed fully.
Yeah. So that's back to that knowing when to pick your fruit, right? You want to make sure that it's picked when it's mature, and just like David just said, if it's picked when it's green, or you pick your fruit when it's green, it hasn't had a chance to develop fully. Yeah.
Bomba tomato this last February. It was like the last ones left on the vine. They had succumbed to cold weather. And it was the very last one, and I thought, oh, I should save the seeds. So I looked it up online, and I did all that, and I should have brought them in. I didn't think about it. I was telling my dad, because my dad took two. I only planted like 5 seeds, and all of them came up. My dad took 2, and I kept 2. I gave 1 away. But the 2 that I kept, one of them is true, like the true cherry Roma shape, and the other ones are cherry size, like the round. And they all came from the same tomatoes. I just thought it was weird that I would get, like the mailman's.
Right. Yeah, well that could be, it could be just a difference in, a lot of the way that plants turn out just has to do with their environment.